Today we're going to talk about musical ties. So the note sheet you need is going to be the Fillable Ties note sheet from Mind CPS Classroom. And this is actually going to be a really short one today. I did want to put up this video in case anybody needed a refresher or missed the lesson. So here's the note sheet. It just looks like this. It is just the word tie, T-I-E, in that first blank. So a tie is a musical symbol that connects two or more notes of the same pitch together. So in order to connect two notes with a tie, they do have to be the same pitch. So it can't be do and do. It's got to be do and do next to each other, the same exact note, so you can connect them. You can then add the rhythmic value of those two notes to get a total rhythmic value. So that means this note gets however many beats it's supposed to get, and this note gets however many beats it's supposed to get. If you put them together with a tie, all you do is add their values together. That's it. This is what a tie looks like. Just kind of looks like a smiley face. So, for example, if we were going to tie a quarter note and a half note together like this, the total is going to be, if we take quarter note, we said is usually 1 beat, then the half note is usually 2 beats. We're just going to add 1 plus 2. Which means together, those are 3 beats total. That's it. So we're going to try these next 4 together as well. So on number 1, again, you might need your rhythms notes in order to really recall all of this information. But we're going to complete the following math equations. They're not super difficult. In that yellow box, we're just going to say how many beats each set of note receives. So first one, we've got a whole note. We're going to tie it to a half note. A whole note we said is 4 beats. A half note is 2. 4 plus 2 is 6. Over here, this is an eighth note, and it's tied to a quarter note. So we're going to say an eighth note we said is half of a beat. So that's 1/2. A quarter note we said is 1 beat. That's going to be a half plus 1. So we're going to get 1 and a half. And if you prefer, you can write it as 1.5. That's up to you. 1.5 beats. So for this one, this is a little bit trickier. This is the 16th note, and it gets a 1/4 of a beat. This is an 8th note, and it gets half of a beat. So we're going to add 1/4 plus 1/2, which is kind of confusing, but if you know your math, you know that 1/4 plus 1/2 is actually going to be 3/4. Because if you fix your fractions, you can figure that out. But yeah, 1/4 plus a half, because that's 1/4 plus 2/4 is going to be 3/4. And then the last one here is number 4. We said this is a quarter note, it gets 1 beat. And then this is a whole note, and it gets 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. And that's all we're doing, super easy. So I'm going to share with you some examples because we need to also talk about how we're going to say these with Takadimi. And it's not super difficult, but actually, here, I'll go back to this page first. The only thing that makes it kind of challenging is if you are holding these notes out, you don't say the second one. You just keep holding whatever like syllable you started with. So like for each of these, since it's on a downbeat, you're always going to start with a ta. So the only thing that changes is how long you're holding that ta for. So like normally what I would have done here is speak this ta for 4 beats and this ta for 2. Instead, what I'm doing is just speaking 1 ta for 6 beats total. So go ta for 6 entire beats. This one is a little bit more complicated on number 2 because normally what we have done, or what we would have done, is give this one half a beat and this one a full beat. So that means if we're going 1.5 beats, that's going to be 1/2, another half, another half. So the way that you're going to speak it is to go ta, but I don't go all the way to the end of 2. I just go half, half, half. So that's 1.5. And we're not going to go through number 3 because that's going to be something we'll work on a little bit later. But for number 4, again, you're just going to say ta for that first one. You don't restart your ta for the whole note, though. You're just going to count to 5 beats in your head and then think the whole note in your mind. So in your head, you need to know, okay, I switched over from the quarter note to the whole note, but you don't actually say anything differently. You just say on ta. So you're going to go like this. Ta for 5 beats. So that's kind of how that works. We're going to do a little bit of practice with that now. So let me open up my first example, and I will share it with you. It looks like this. So this is just 4 measures of a little example, and I'm going to point something out, and then we're going to try to speak it together. So the only thing in here is quarter notes and half notes. So if you see a quarter note, you're going to give it 1 beat, or a ta on 1 beat. If you see a half note, you're going to give it ta on 2 beats. The only thing that's kind of confusing is right here in between measure number 3 and measure number 4. Remember, we know it's the end of each measure because of the bar line. So there's measure 1, bar line, measure 2, bar line, measure 3, bar line, measure 4, double bar line because it's the end. So in between measure 3 and 4, these 2 half notes are tied together across the bar line. And you absolutely can tie notes across the bar line. The same rules still apply. You're still going to hold for the whole time. So it means we don't restate this half note when we get here. We're just going to keep holding. And on our minds, we have to go, okay, right here, I got to end this first half note and start this second half note in my mind, but I'm not going to actually do that out loud. So go ahead and try speaking and patching this whole example with me from the beginning, and I'll kind of show you what I mean. So we'll just start right here at the top. 1, and ready, speak. Ta, 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 ta. So what you may want to do, if it's easier for you when you get here, is do a little quick math and say, okay, that's 2 beats, that's 2 beats. That means this total is 4, so I'm just going to count to 4 when I get there. And you can do that. I think sometimes when we're holding for longer, that can get a little bit confusing. So I like to go in my head, okay, 1 and 2 and then in my head I'm going, this half note goes 3 and 4 and, this first half note goes 1 and 2 and. So that means I don't switch words until after I've finished that half note, basically. But if that's confusing for you, you can just go 2 plus 2 is 4 and then hold it for 4 beats. So we're going to do a couple more. Let me open my next one. And go ahead and just take a look at that. Figure out where the tie is. Figure out what 2 notes are tied together and how many beats that's going to be total. And we're going to go ahead and try to speak this together from the beginning without me pointing anything out to you. So let's try it. Just right from the very first measure here from that quarter note. So go ahead and patch and speak with me. 1, and ready, go. Ta, 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 ta. And that's the end. And we know it's the end again because of that double bar line. So hopefully you figured that one out. We tied 2 quarter notes together. That means instead of being 1 beat and 1 beat separately, this was 2 whole beats. And you were supposed to hold it across that bar line. I'm going to pull up another one really quick. So here's a third one. We're going to do the same thing. Go ahead and look and see where the tie is. And notice what 2 kinds of notes are tied together. Try to remember how many beats each one of those notes get. And then add their values together. And then notice how many beats that's going to be. Now we're going to go ahead and try to speak it from the beginning. 1, and ready, go. Ta, 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 ta. So hopefully you notice that this tie is connecting a quarter note, which is 1 beat, to a half note, which is 2 beats, and 1 plus 2 is 3. That means this guy you're going to hold for a full 3 beats. So hopefully that was what you did when you were speaking and patching. We're just going to do 3 more examples, and these are going to be a little bit shorter, actually. So here's your first one. This looks kind of silly. Can we zoom in here, please? Yeah, okay. All right, so this is just one little measure. This is a little bit more confusing because now we're tying a quarter note to an eighth note. We said that if we're going to do that, that quarter note is 1 beat, that eighth note is half a beat. So total, this is 1.5 beats, which is very difficult to count if you've never done it before. But it's not super terrible. So we're going to talk about what would we do if we didn't have the tie. So pretend that tie isn't there for a second, and kind of think through how you would speak it on Takadimi. So if that tie wasn't there, hopefully you thought this in your brain. If we didn't have a tie, we would go ta, 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 di. So those last 2 eighth notes would be ta, di. So the only difference is because the tie isn't there, we just don't speak that first eighth note. We keep holding the quarter note sound over through that eighth note. So once we get there, in our minds, we need to go, okay, I switched over to the eighth note, but I'm not going to say anything differently until I get to this separate eighth note that's not tied. So once I get to here, I get to say D. But for these little ones right here, we're just going to keep on holding. So let's try to speak that whole thing with the tie now. We'll do it a couple of times just to make sure we know what's going on. 1, 2, ready, go. Ta, 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 di. So what you should have noticed is that once you get here, we're going ta, ah, di. So normally where you would go ta, ta, di, you're just holding that first quarter note over. Go ahead and speak this whole thing one more time. And make sure you're patching as well. 1, and ready, go. Ta, 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 di. So that's how we're going to speak it when we've just got a quarter note tied to an eighth note, which again can be kind of challenging. We're going to do one more of those that has a similar situation going on. So here's this one. And look and see where the tie is. Kind of think through in your brain how you're going to speak this one. And let's try it together from the beginning. 1, and ready, go. Ta, ta, di, ta. So hopefully you noticed again that we've got a quarter note, which is 1 beat, tied to an eighth note, which is half a beat. Together, that's 1.5, which is kind of weird. So for me, it's easier in my brain to go, okay, normally I would go ta, ta, di. All I'm going to do is not restart my sound for that eighth note. I'm just going to wait and think it in my head until I say D. So it's going to go ta, D. Try it one more time with me just to make sure from the top. 1, and ready, go. Ta, ta, D. Ta. That's the end. Of that one, let's see, we got one more example to try here. Oops. This one's just a smidge longer. It's going to be 2 measures instead of 1 measure. And again, take a second to look and see where the tie is. Notice what 2 kinds of notes are tied together. How many beats does the first one get? How many beats does the second one get? And how many beats is that total? Now go ahead and look at the first measure and kind of think through how you would say it, how you would speak it on Takadimi. Do the same thing with the second measure. Now maybe you want to think about how would I speak, like in your head here, how would you speak this on Takadimi if there was no tie? Go ahead and think through that in your mind. And now go ahead and think through how would you speak it on Takadimi, adding the tie in, which means all you're going to do is not restart your sound for that first eighth note at the beginning of the second measure. Let's kind of think through. How are you going to say that with the tie? And we're going to go ahead and try it together from the beginning. So here we go. Make sure you're speaking and patching with me. 1 and ready, go. Ta, 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 di, ta, di, ta, ta, ta. That's it. Hopefully you notice that there's a quarter note, which is 1 beat, tied to an eighth note, which is half a beat. So in total, that's going to be 1.5 beats. But again, what I like to do is just go, okay, I'm going to keep holding my quarter note sound until I get here. Then I'm going to think that first ta in my head and then switch to D. So if you're speaking just this rhythm together, it's going to go ta, D. Hopefully I didn't lose you too much. We'll do some more practice with that in the future.